He's in his car. I love it. What's going on, Mr. Verreault? Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, man. I'm outside of the Ukrainian hall my daughter takes dance lessons at every Saturday that her mom and her mom took lessons at. And
Oh,
somehow now
okay.
that equals me driving her here every
That's
Saturday morning.
beautiful. So you're kind of killing two birds and waiting for her to finish up and all that. It's good to see you, by
Yep.
the way. Yeah, it's been a
Good to
while.
see you too, man. Yeah, is this gonna sound and look
Yeah, it'd
all
be
right
great.
for what you need?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
good.
yeah. I'm coming downstairs and I was I'm just going to go quickly talk to Shaun Verreault. My wife goes, oh, cool. I'm like, yeah, he hasn't been on the podcast. Like I've done, I don't know how many shows we've done over the years, but certainly four or five,
Right.
I would think, probably in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Um,
Man, I think 5 years ago we had just done the last thing any of us did before COVID
it
together.
was the event that set it off, like quite literally, dude, right?
Yeah, right. Like, should we hug? I don't know if we're allowed to hug. It was just getting to that point.
I do remember it being quite weird.
Yeah.
That's some weird times, hey? Like, so what was that like for you? What a weird thing to jump off into COVID right away. But like, what was that like for your world? Because for me, quickly before you get to your
Yeah.
story, I did all my work from BCIT at home. My kids, of course, were coming home, and I was essentially homeschooling with Jess too, right?
Right.
What was it like for you guys?
Well, obviously on the music tip, it was nothingness. So after a while, I started differentiating the days by I'd really started to get into developing the lap steel technique with three slides that I've been doing. And I was fortunate that I was working at a guitar company, a local guitar design and manufacture company in Delta called Graphtech, who design and make saddles and nuts and bridge pins, basically all the parts on different guitars that Fender and Martin and Gibson and Taylor and lots of boutique builders and music stores take. So the
Mhm.
factory stayed open and I was able to do my gig of partnering with different guitar companies and designing stuff with them um from home. But it was the same struggle with three people trying to, work from home or do school on Microsoft Teams and fighting over the Wi-Fi that you had available and trying to find a space to do it. So I found myself musically pretty much every day going, what day is tomorrow? It's John Lennon's birthday. All right, I'm gonna learn and arrange a song for lap steel that I've never tried to play before.
Mhm.
And I just started moving the finish line further and further away where it was like, I bet I couldn't play Van Halen's Hot for Teacher on this thing. And I mean like not just the guitar part, but the guitar part and the vocal melody and the rhythm and like the full arrangement.
Yeah.
And then I started going, all right, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, Cliffs of Dover by Eric Johnson, just picking ones that I thought there's no way I'll be able to do. And that was what musically kind of got me through that time was woodshedding like when I was 12 in my bedroom at home,
Mhm.
listening to records, learning songs.
And that's what you did at that age too, at 12, right? Like you're
Totally.
literally like 8 hours in your room just learning stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, playing along to records. It's it it's almost like the real thing. We did a couple things where we would FaceTime with each other, but you couldn't really go two ways and jam and Saf would send me some stuff and
Mm.
I'd play over top of it and send it back. So we kind of duct taped some musical collaboration together. Did a couple of those live streams that were the thing at the moment, but because I had the steady guitar gig, whenever someone would reach out and go, "Hey, we got a bit of a budget to do this live stream thing," I was directing them to my friends who were just trying to stay afloat and on government funding and like call this guy. He needs this one more than I do.
Mm. Mm. Shaun, was it like right out of the gate for you that you like picked up the guitar, or was it like you picked it up and then it's just like hard work to get to where it was, or was there like a natural innate ability from the start?
Hmm. Good question. I started on acoustic when I was 10, um, and struggled off the beginning. It hurts your fingers, it makes you feel stupid. Everything else you do when you're 10 is like, I can play Lego. As soon as I start playing Lego, guitar was tough, and I was on the cusp of kind of falling out of love and giving up on it. And then one
Really?
day I had the flu and I had to stay home. And I had the guitar in my room and I just something clicked and I looked at it as something I could play with rather than another source of homework, another thing I had to do. And I would just like sing into the sound hole and hear how it sounded like reverb and strum behind the nut and the tuners where it would go pring and go, ooh, that's a cool sound. And little by little, it emerged as a thing I could play with and have fun with and play in unorthodox ways rather than just here's the music, here's additional homework you have to do as a 10-year-old. And that kind of started things. And then I heard at the same time Purple Rain, the album had come out, so the beginning of When Doves Cry and the end of Let's Go Crazy just blew my head off, and I want to have to learn how to do whatever that guy is doing on those two songs, and that lit the fire the most.
Prince.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Right? He was doing stuff that like nobody was doing. And the
It was just,
videos and like he had the movie, he was in the movie and all that. Like it was just
yeah.
massive.
And I was right at probably too young for some of the subject matter, but as a young guitar
Sure.
player, I remember I did Darling Nikki at the first Toddcast live
That,
podcast hang we did.
that's right. You did
Um,
Darling Nikki, yeah.
and he just, yeah, the imagination and the fact that it was its own universe. Like he looked different every record. He played different guitars for every record, and he was really eclectic. It's like,
Hmm.
what style of music is he? Well, he's Prince, so there's
It's all
rock
over the
and
map. And
funk
he's
and
got a
pop and
female drummer and like,
yeah.
it's just he's just stood out among the rest and rightfully so, right? Like so you do you remember where you were when you heard that he passed?
I do, yeah. I'd played the night before and he died early enough in the morning that I woke up to my phone just blowing up. Everyone knows what a massive Prince fan I am. So that morning I saw messages before I saw the news of, my wife and friends going, I'm so sorry. I know how much he meant to you and yeah, it was devastating just to think of the work that wouldn't happen as a result of him dying because he was so prodigious and where a lot of people at that point in their careers fall into kind of greatest hits or okay, here's what the live shows are going to be like forever now.
Hmm.
He had just done the solo piano tour, which he'd never done before. The tour before that was the last time I saw him, where he did the Third Eye Girl trip with the three-piece band and him. That was the most guitar playing, the most Hendrixy he'd ever been in his life. So I feel, ripped off that we don't get to see what else he would have done. But in the wake of it, because he was so controlling about any videos of him or any music coming out, all these performances that I'd never seen before, either the estate or the people who had made them, knowing that he wouldn't be coming after them to pull it down,
Yeah.
started putting out so many performances that I'm still finding stuff I hadn't seen and
Right.
introducing my daughter to it. And yeah, what a genius and what a life's work and so inspiring to me.
Yeah, because you're right. He continually pushed himself throughout his whole career, right till his death. And,
Yeah,
and people don't realize that he's also written a ton of great songs for other people.
right.
Like it's not just his body of work. He's just a master. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just sleeping 3 hours a night and being in the studio anytime he wasn't on stage. It's really a model for, and I have other things in my life that keep me from doing that. But the idea of living out on the edge of your capabilities all the time rather than rolling softly into the middle where everything is easy,
Mm,
I've always wanted to push myself musically and as a singer and as a player and branching out into different instruments. I mean, I'll never match his list of any instrument he could sit down on if he showed up and a band was playing and just crush on it. But I'm expanding out into other stuff beyond guitar and find it super inspiring.
yeah, agreed. Yeah, and you're definitely one of those artists that people watch and are super inspired by as well. Like, dude, you are
Thanks.
absolute maniac, like crazy. The stuff you post on your Instagram and on Facebook and stuff, like where you're just like you say, can I learn this whatever Van Halen song, but like all of the parts, dude,
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome. So what were your parents doing like for jobs as when you were a kid growing up? Like, how did you get down this path?
It's an interesting one. My I was born when they were teenagers, not married, had just been dating for a while, and I was a bit of a surprise.
Oh, okay.
Um, and my dad had just recently graduated from like chef training in Saskatoon.
Hmm.
So he, before I was born, had moved to Alberta, where you're a young chef. It's like being a young band. You got to do the gigs for exposure. So he was in Tabor, Alberta, and I was living with my mom and her widowed mom and her six siblings in Saskatoon, as the baby, just surrounded by this family. So eventually, it got to a point where he came back, they got together, and we moved around as his chef career started moving. We'd live in like Alberta for a year, BC for a year, Humboldt, Saskatchewan for a year, and we really moved around a lot, which I think I don't remember it being traumatic. Like, I don't remember I have to say goodbye to all my friends I made this year and we're moving to another place. So I think that mentality probably helped when we started going on the road all the time and
Sure.
helped. I can walk into a room where I don't know anybody, and for some people, that's a really terrifying thing. For me, it's just an opportunity to meet a bunch of people I don't know. So I think that informed that, and it was a lot of just my mom and I. And then we moved back to Saskatoon where a lot of my family was. And and that was where I met, Saf. That was where I met lots of people who are my friends to this day, and we kind of put roots down a little bit more. And then yeah, when I was 10, there was a music store that had you can try out guitar for 8 weeks thing, which I think my parents liked the idea of because they'd heard of other kids that their family saved up and bought a piano and the kid played it for a bit and then hated piano and never played it.
Right.
So this place would loan you a guitar for 8 weeks, and then if you were into it, you could either buy that guitar or buy another one after. And that was when the home with the flu day and discovering guitar, and then discovering Prince, and then that led me down to where someone gave us a tape, gave my cousin and I a tape. I think it was a neighbor that had Hendrix live at the BBC on one side and John Lee Hooker on the other side. And both of them against a backdrop of like Madonna and shiny 80s pop music just were terrifying. They were like, this is the rawest, noisiest, dangerous sounding, but little by little that seeped in, and that was all I wanted to know and hear for a while. So along with the Steve Vais and the Joe Satrianis and the really technically amazing guitar playing that was happening in the 80s. um Eventually, the I think one of the biggest gateway drugs was Stevie Ray Vaughan came into my consciousness, and he was such uh he would turn you on to, if you like me, that's great. Almost like Billy Strings is now for bluegrass for kids. If you
Mm,
like me,
mm.
that's great. I'm happy. You should also check out everyone who came before me in the pre-YouTube days of it not just being presented to you. So Stevie would be like, I rip off most of my stuff from Albert King, but I love BB and Freddie, and you got to check out T-Bone Walker, and so that just led me to discovering all of that music. And at that time, I met Saf, who was another only kid who had a drum kit in his basement, and we first got together on pots and pans in my parents' house. Me on acoustic and he just playing whatever. And then his parents bought him this. I think a Rush fan retired or died, and he had this fucking massive like kit that took up a whole basement with a gong behind him and rototoms and stuff. And Saf's parents, wanting to support him, bought this kit. And so we'd go over to his house and he would be behind this massive cockpit of just all kinds of drums, really only knowing how to do rolls on the snare. And we just kind of played it out and started to discover what it is to play with someone else, what it is to write music, all of those things together.
That's so cool, dude. And so, are you finding all of these artists yourself, or was it like from the house as a kid? Like, what were your parents playing in your house?
Good question. My mom loved sappy singer-songwriter guys like BJ Thomas and Mac Davis and Air Supply and all that kind of stuff. My dad was like a Steve Miller, the Beatles, classic rock guy, CCR,
Yeah,
um, where I think a lot of it came from, not having an older sibling or that kind of person turning me on to it. It started to be guitar teachers, guitar magazines, that kind of stuff really filtered a lot of things in. And it was such a different time, I was in Saskatoon recently and found like a journal from that time where I was like, I have three tapes now. I have Prince, I have this Too Hot to Handle one that was like one of those golden platinum record company compilations with
sure.
like Mr. and Whitney Houston and stuff on it.
Like the
And
big shiny tunes kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Harbinger of what was to come. And you just kind of get little bits of things because you couldn't, there wasn't a Spotify or a YouTube to hop onto it. So
yeah.
just being a sponge. And then Saskatoon still has a blues bar that had a Saturday afternoon jam at it called Buds on Broadway. And kids could go to it. So the first time I walked into it, I thought a jam was like people sitting around in a circle with instruments and they'd all pick a tune and all play it together. And I thought I was ready for that. And I walked in and a hot band was playing on stage and the guitar player was playing behind his head. And I turned around to leave because I was like, I'm not ready for this yet. And in a beautiful, generous move, a local singer named Susie Vinnick, who's a crazy good blues singer and tours and writes to this day, saw this kid with a gig bag turn around to go, and she put her hand on my shoulder. Went, "Where are you going, kid?" I was like, "I don't think I'm ready for this." And she went, "You don't know until you try, though, do you?" She went, "Do you sing?" And I was like, "Not really. I play guitar." And she went, "I'm up next. Come up with me. We'll just you we'll have another guitar player. It won't all be on you, but just come up and see what it feels like." And it was a such a generous move that I'll never forget that got me up on stage that day and played and felt what it was like for the first time. And that lit a fire that's still burning.
That's incredible. Do you still talk to her?
Yeah, we're still in touch. We played some shows together over the years, and I've been able to share with her that yeah, that put me on my path as much as anything that anyone ever did.
Hmm. Hmm. Give us the Coles notes of like or I guess like the broad strokes of Wide Mouth Mason and like the first show, first radio play, like
Mm.
getting across Canada tour and all that. Like get into to Wide Mouth a bit.
Into the birth of it. Well, I'd played with Saf for since we were 10 or 11. He started getting kind of more into sports in high school. So I played this talent show thing at a mall, where it was like a competition, and I'd worked up this finger tapping thing, and I think I came in second, and the band that beat me was the band that Earl, the bassist from Wide Mouth Mason, was the singer in. And he and his family were all musical, and they had this band that was great. So that was my first encounter with him. And then another drummer buddy that I've been jamming with asked me to go play at his school variety night, which I'd played at my own schools, and then I went to do it at this thing and went, "Hey, that's that other guy, that's Earl and his band." Um, Also on this same thing. So we talked a little there, and at a certain point I went, I know a bass player now, and I still know this drummer. What would happen if we all got together and just played? So we showed up in Saf's basement. Earl was wearing his outfit from Arby's that he had to go work at later, and Saf was still wearing his coveralls from mowing lawns for the city, and I was wearing my tie from working at a music store in Saskatoon, and we all just got together, and we didn't even play other people's songs. We just jammed to see what would happen. And it was like when you get in a conversation with someone and it's really easy and lubricated and just goes back and forth, and it was like that. And so we just started doing that all the time, working out songs that we love to play, whether that was Living Color jams or Hendrix jams. Um, and then I got laid off from that music store. They downsized, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I got this phone call from a drummer saying, I play with this guy. His name is Carson Cole. He has a record deal and he's working on songs, but he, in the meantime, plays a lot of covers. And we have a gig in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories that we need a guitar player for. I can't tell you how long it's going to be for, because when you're heading up there driving, you either have to go take a ferry at a certain point or drive over the ice. And there's a period that we're about to go into where it's too icy for the ferry, but not hard enough to drive over. So we might be there for 4 weeks. We might be there for 7 weeks. We might be there for 8 weeks. We don't know. But it was like, 50 bucks a man per night, like just barely getting by. And I was like, are we going to meet and rehearse? What are we going to do? And they were like, no, if you say yes, we'll be at your place in an hour and we got to start driving. So it's like, well, I don't have anything else, so sure, let's go.
Oh
What I
my
didn't
God,
know
that's
was
awesome.
it was when there was a strike in the giant mine in Yellowknife, and they'd flown in replacement workers to take over, and someone set off explosives and killed a bunch of people. So it was warfare. It was a civil war in Yellowknife when I showed up. And the club, every night we do a couple sets of the five we were supposed to do each night, and then a fight would break out. We'd get behind the amps, pepper spray would start happening. They'd flown up these refrigerator-sized RCMP from all over the company to be in Yellowknife. We'd go to someone's house party and they'd be like, out the window, my shoes, my coat, out the window. A fight had started in the kitchen. And so it was a baptism of fire for this 20 kid to be thrown into. But after a while, they started going, what songs do you sing? Well, I don't know. I can kind of do this Black Crowes one and kind of do this Hendrix one. And bit by bit, I started singing more. It really taught me about, um, if the crowd is not on your side, you have the microphone, you have the songs to be able to pull out. So I learned it was like university for me. And I did well enough that he started offering me more gigs. So it would be like Prince George at the Generator for a week of playing covers, or every every Prince or River or Grand or anything around Western Canada, we'd go play at for a week. And I learned a lot of really important things from that. And after a while, Earl, who had been dabbling in going to university and decided it wasn't for him, started going, does he need a bass player ever? I'd love to be on the road all the time. And when I'd come home, Saf and Earl and I would jam, and Saf was still kind of figuring out if he'd gone to McGill and was he going to go to school. And um, he came out on the road, and it was Earl and I had been doing it quite a bit, and Saf had only sort of been doing it when we were around, and there was a real disparity. We'd grown as players quite a bit, and he was struggling with the tempo has to be the same all the way through. The things as an experienced drummer you start to know, but as a young drummer, you're like, I just want to jam out. So he was a bit conflicted about it, and then this turn happened in his mind where he went, "No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to your first question, he didn't have as much natural talent as some people when he sat down to do it, but it was similar with his soccer playing. He really wanted to play soccer, but wasn't a naturally gifted athlete, but just stayed longer than everybody, did more drills than everybody, and got good at it. So he threw himself into drumming and started to do it. And then after a while, we started getting offered gigs at some of these places, and they were some pretty hairy joints, man, of these three young dudes who looked like a Benetton ad walking into Provost, Alberta, where there's a you know, the leader of the Aryan nations of Canada. We're not too happy to have these guys all playing together, and would show up at the gig and just stand in front of Earl like this the whole time that we were playing and want to fight us after. And it I feel for bands who like get famous from uh, a sync or a clip going mad on TikTok, because we learned in that process, if we were on the road doing that for a couple years, um, how to manage a crowd, how to have the authority and take control of the room, and limit things like that, outbursts and people being against you. And as things started to happen for us, we started playing more and more blues clubs, because we found not only did we prefer playing that to whatever covers we had to play in rock bars, but they were more open to us playing our own stuff.
Mm.
So uh, originally it'd be like, this is a Cream B-side, and then we'd play our own jam. And then after a while, it just started to be, if we did enough stuff that kept them moving and that had enough playing in it, they were into it.
Slowly stick in one song of yours here and there, four or five
Yeah.
songs, right? Like,
Yep. And it was I mean, we learned how to write songs. Like, what is a bridge supposed to do? How long should a chorus be, from playing these cover songs? It was, people look down their nose at it a little bit, but there's no better training than feeling what it's like to play a great song in front of a huge crowd of people and understand what the function of that next section of the song is. So
mm,
it taught us a lot. And bit by bit, we started, label people started showing up. More and more people started coming to see us, whether it was in Edmonton or Saskatoon or Calgary. And we made an independent record at Carson's Farm in Coronation with just the sparsest recording gear, but we had been on the road for a long time and we're starting to figure out how to do it. And then from there, um, we did a gig in Saskatoon, and our manager at the time just goaded Gordy Johnson, because Big Sugar were headlining it, going, "You need to see my band. You need to see my band." And to make him go away, he said, "I'll come watch the first couple songs from the soundboard." And at the end of it, he came in our dressing room and went, "What are you guys doing for the next month and a half? I want you to open our tour." And Digging a Hole had just come out, and they had a sold out tour across Canada from coast to coast. And that was the seed of our audience across the country. We'd gotten in fighting shape from playing all these little places that people were angry at the color of two-thirds of the band's skin in, and we were ready when there was a room that was geared a little bit toward us. It was fish in a barrel compared to what we'd been doing. Um, and then from there,
Hmm.
the first couple singles came out, and you remember it was a totally different music industry then, right? Every city had a rep from every record company who had relationships, and there were multiple weekly newspapers and daily newspapers and breakfast TV shows. So we just did all that stuff, man. We do promo for hours around every show and then go hang at a Sea Fox or something talking to people after sound check and then head over to the gig and built it up one person at a time.
Radio back then was huge.
Totally.
What do you think is the biggest thing right now for bands that are trying to break or make it? Like, is it you were talking like TikTok and all those like is it that? Is it social media? Like, what's the biggest thing now for a band, do you think? Is it still
Good
radio?
question. I mean, I feel like there are so many different paths now. Um, it's been great to see with Mother Mother how they already had an established thing, and then TikTok made them a global touring entity. I'm so happy for them.
Yeah,
Because for a lot of other artists, all TikTok does is make people recognize 5 seconds of one of your songs, but it's not enough to make them come see you play live or check out your record. Um, I I I know there's a lot of different ways for it to happen, but for us, every good thing in the old record industry and in the new music business has come from someone seeing us play somewhere. From us doing a gig and someone coming to the dressing room after, regardless of moves our management made or connections we had through people, it's always been someone seeing us and going, "Hey, we're doing a ZZ Top tour and we need an opener. You guys were great tonight. How would you like to do that?" Or, um,
damn.
you
Dude,
know, the
let me just pick this up for you. Just drop ZZ
yeah,
Top.
yeah,
That's so
exactly.
rad. Like, how crazy was that tour? How long did you
Mm.
go with those guys for? It was a substantial amount of time, was it not?
It was. We did two tours with them, and we did one in '97, um, where it was like, all right, at the end of the tour, they're gonna stand like this. You walk through the room. We'll take a photo when you're here, and then that's it. That was as much as we interacted with them, which
Yeah.
is cool. When we did the second tour, the first sound check we did, Billy Gibbons was on stage hanging out and introduced himself and knew Gordy a little bit because through his work with Warren Haynes of Government Mule, they'd had Gibbons in to record on a Government Mule record, and Gordy was
Oh,
engineering and producing it. So they'd kind of met each other and talked a bit. And he showed up for that tour we did in 2010 maybe, and was just we were a crew for the rest of that run. So for 2, 3 weeks, every day would be, are we going to go hang on Billy's bus where he's going to just pull guitars out of storage and show them to us, or play us unreleased tracks, or tell us tales about Hendrix and that stuff? Or are we going to go out on the town and show up somewhere with fucking Billy Gibbons and go, we want to jam. Are there any instruments here? And shut
gee.
down a bar and just play for the staff. It was the most fun we'd had on the road up until that point. And then uh made a record right after that. And it was we've had a lot of opportunities like that with whether it was the Stones or AC/DC or ZZ Top, where things happened where they needed an opener and we ended up fitting the slot and got to do these, you know, if I could phone 10-year-old me and tell him some of the stuff we've been able to do, it it would blow his mind just like it blows mine. It's hard to believe some of it is real.
Yeah. Did your parents drag you to many concerts as a kid?
Not really. Um, I kind of discovered it myself. And in Saskatoon back then there weren't a lot of concerts. Like now, it often gets skipped over.
Hmm.
Um, First concert I saw was In Excess on the Kick tour with Steel Pulse, the reggae band. Bad boys, what
Okay.
you gonna do? Opening, and that spun my head completely. But
Yeah.
um,
Dude, I
for
saw
me, it
In
was more
Excess
the
at Disneyland of all places. You know, sometimes like there'll be a band that's kind of playing randomly in Disneyland, right? And it was In Excess. And I think it was for the Kick tour as well.
Wow, what a
Yeah,
gig.
back in like the mid to later '80s. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I mean, and those were arena shows, which, the ZZ Top and AC/DC and Stones shows in arenas and stadiums made clear that it's a totally different game with different things required to play a room like this, where many of my formative musical experiences were in clubs where local heroes, like a just devastatingly good guitar player named Jack Semple would play and sing, or Big Dave McLean, who's an Order of Canada winning blues musician and like the muddy waters of Western Canada. Seeing that close up was what made it feel more doable for me. Seeing someone in an arena was like, well, that's a million miles away. And, in Saskatoon, Joni Mitchell and kind of the Northern Pikes were the only people we were aware of who'd been able to go do it. So it just was, as an only child, it was a thing that I could do all the time and discover parts about myself and discover creativity and to play a bad day out into to celebrate a good day on. So it was almost like a yoga practice more than a career aspiration until we started doing these gigs and people started packing out the place and record companies started showing up, and then it was like, well, maybe we can make a go of this.
Hmm. What was your first concert you went to?
The INXS one was the first big one that I went to, and then it was just kind of slim, like Poison would come through, and it'd be like, well, I'm not a huge Poison fan, but it's
But
the only show
I'll,
coming,
I'll
so
check
I'm
it
gonna
out.
go
Like
see that. And then like the
that's so good, man.
yeah, it was there wasn't a ton of me, and that was one of the things that blew my mind when I moved to Vancouver was not only do so many shows come here, but so many of them begin or end here. And there's such an energy around the first show of a tour, like when the Police rehearsed and did those rehearsal live shows and then did the first one, and really loved that about living in this city and experiencing the music that way versus Saskatoon. Still often tours are like, all right, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and not Saskatoon.
Yeah, poor Saskatoonians.
Hmm.
Um, when when you go and do shows, regardless of the size of the room, like say you do a cafe and it's 50 people, you're on a stage, opening up for ZZ Top and it's 12,000. Do you change your game at all? Like is there like a switch or something? Like, or is it just like constant? Like, if you see me in a cafe, it's the same as seeing me somewhere else. It's just a bigger venue.
Good question. Um, we figured out over time that an arena or a stadium require bigger, um, grander gestures that reach to the back, that there isn't as much room for nuance or little bits because they don't translate in the thick air and the noise of those places. So the reason that nobody works in a stadium better than ZZ Top, or I mean, sorry, than AC/DC, is every sound is spiky and sparse and crisp, and there aren't that many elements, and they all do everything boldly and sparsely and proudly and loudly. Um, Versus, you know, a U2 or something, there's all these echoes and delays that when you see them at the Sphere, it's amazing and you can hear all of. when you see them in a stadium, a lot of that stuff gets lost.
It's kind of
So
bouncing around the place.
yeah, you don't, depending on where you're sitting, you hear it or it kind of blends in with other stuff. So the intensity that we bring to it will be the same at, the little tiny club in Quebec we're going to play at the end of the month versus the theater we're playing in Burlington to begin the tour, or a big room that we play opening for someone. That would be the only difference, is that in a smaller place we improvise a bit more, we take liberties with things more. You can hear if Saf is playing ghost notes on the snare to slightly change the groove a bit, where in an arena or a stadium it's more like just big primary colors, um, and fewer notes because they all blend together. So it's more impactful to have one loud primary color than a bunch of different hues of things, is kind of the difference that I've found works. Um, and you know, we talk very little on arena and stadium stages. In a club, you can get more conversational. In the Commodore, you can tell a story of how a song was born. In an arena or a stadium, it's like just keep the music going.
Hmm, interesting. Love
Yeah.
that. Love that answer. Canucks, let's talk the boys. Were you surprised that they didn't do anything by the trade deadline, dude? Were you surprised?
I mean, against the backdrop of everything that's going on in the world right now, it just feels like nothing is surprising anymore.
Mm,
Everything's upside down. Everything's crazy. I work during the day at a tech company that my role is we work with festivals and tour promoters and concert promoters and artist managers. But the other half of what the company does is work with sports teams, including the Canucks. And yeah, you kind of zoom out and go, I'm glad it's someone else's job to make these decisions, because you're never going to please everybody and you never know what's going to happen by the end of the year. But it's folded into this soup of the fuckery that the world has been in the last couple months, and it just feels like, oh, of course, yeah, of course,
tack it
things
on.
are weird and not normal. So I don't know if that's a good answer for that, but it just feels like, man, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
It that 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 the run into game 7 of the finals was a beautiful moment, and I hope we get to feel that excitement again, but it's been a long building period getting back there.
it sure has been. Yeah, it feels like it's a rebuild. It feels like okay, we need to like look at the engine. What are the components that are not working? Because like, no offense, shit's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
definitely feel that.
internal strife and all that stuff, is it's like it's like with a band, we went through that period where Earl's no longer playing with us and he wanted to go do something new. And the time leading up to that is, if you've been in a relationship that isn't working, but neither of you want to be the person to break up because of what it meant at one time, it's it's hard to move on and rebuild, but it's part of life. It's what everyone has to do at some point.
Mhm. Necessary sometimes. Yeah. What are you watching lately, buddy? What are you binge watching with the family?
We, oh, sorry, ambulance going by. Lately I've been, and I shared a bunch of this on social media. I've been living life on profound setting for the first half of 2025.
Mm.
My dad passed away in January,
Oh no.
unexpectedly, of a heart attack.
Oh
And then
geez.
right as we were getting through that, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she died a month after he died. So
Oh,
a lot of what I've been watching and listening to has been around that. There's there's a conversation around loss and grief that for a long time people didn't know how to address, didn't know how to talk about. And there have been some really beautiful things I've discovered, like Nick Cave has that Ask Me Anything called the Red Hand Files, and has done a bunch of interviews with people. And he had both of his sons over a couple years died, one in a tragic accident, one I think from overdosing. Um, Stephen Colbert has these beautiful interviews because he had a 9/11 in the 70s where his dad and two brothers died in a plane crash on 9/11, but in the 70s. And Anderson Cooper. So to answer your question, not to sound like a bummer, because there's been a lot of joy and becoming a full human in it. Much of what I've been watching in the last couple of months has been to learn how to navigate this profound loss of my parents both dying.
Wow. Dude, I'm so sorry. I didn't know either had passed.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy. And
it's
that's, of
crazy.
course, that's something like that, my parents are both alive, but like you don't ever get used to the whole.
Yeah. And they weren't they it wasn't like a I'll follow you into the dark situation where they were together and then one died and the other one I can't live without you. They've been divorced for decades and with new partners who were amazing, and it just was a coincidence. So
Oh,
I
wow.
think you never get over it, but it becomes like a passenger and a part of you and in all the decisions that you make in your life, I feel like. And people either I think it was Nick Cave who was talking about this. You either harden around the void where they no longer are, or it breaks you open into a million pieces and you start to appreciate beauty even more. You start to hug people you're hugging for even longer because you know how quickly things can change. And you start to um, really look at your entire life and what's important to you and what's meaningful, and make sure that you lean into that. So um, in many ways, it's been really beautiful. The connection with the rest of your family that happens, the connection with my wife and daughter as a result of it. There's been some really deeply amazing results from it beyond just the grief and loss and where younger me would have been like in danger of trying to put it off or trying to just keep myself busy and not think of it. Uh, did you ever watch the Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling?
Yeah.
The Judd Apatow, who worked on the Larry Sanders Show, the family gave uh, Gary's journals to, and he made a three-part series or something about it. And he was talking about his brother died when he was little, and his family just didn't know what to do about it. They just clammed up, and no one ever spoke of it again. And they, you know, had started to manifest itself in different ways, like unhealthy choices or drinking problems or dying of stress and that kind of thing. And he said, if someone had just pulled me aside and went, "Oh, the grief is coming. Let's just sit with it for a while. Let's sit down in the middle of this and feel everything there is to feel without turning away from it, without running away, and just sit. When it passes, your brain will give you all these endorphins and uplifting feelings as a result of going down deep into this." So he was like, I wish someone had done that. So when my dad died, I his partner's daughter called me. I was hanging out. It was late night on a Thursday, and she went, "Your dad's collapsed. The paramedics are here working on him. I'm speaker phoning you into my mom, who's with him's phone on my boyfriend's phone, so you can be there." And they were working on him and telling us what was happening. And then the moment they said, "It's been a half hour, we have to call it. We're not going to be able to resuscitate him." this very clear voice in my brain said, listen, your operating system is going to be really overwhelmed right now, and it's going to spit out all kinds of responses to this. Some painful, some unfair, some why didn't you do this, some hey, you should have done this differently. And I had this really clear voice in my head going, you're sitting by a stream, all this wreckage is going to float by, and you're producing all this wreckage, but you're not responsible for holding on to all of it. So if something comes by that's of use to you and kind to your heart, pull it out and hold on to it. Remember that moment of my dad and my daughter. Remember this talk we had. Remember this thing we did. If something goes by, hey, remember that time you didn't hang out with him when you could have, or you didn't call him when you should have? Just let that shit float by, and you don't need to hold on to it. So in the process of going through all this, it's that's been a constant thing that's started to seep into other parts of how I examine my life of if things are finite, if things can turn around in a second, how do you want to live and what's important to you and what do you hold dear and what do you want to spend your energy and your time on? None of us are getting any younger. And what do you want to do in your time while you're here? It's been it's been a really meaningful time in a bunch of different ways.
That's beautiful, man. There's probably moments in your life now where you think of your parents. So like maybe you're cooking a meal or something or whatever, and like you get those moments where you really feel them, right?
I feel like they're with me. I keep them with me and talk to them in my head when I'm doing stuff. When we were touring a lot or with my VP gig at the tech company, I traveled to a lot of conferences for festivals or Polestar or those types of things. And I would often call my dad from there. Hey, Pop, we're in New Orleans this week, and he would travel vicariously with me. And I still have those conversations with him in my head, or I'll
Mm.
see something that I know he would love, or that my mom would love, and because the one of the shocks is I still go to call or text them when something happens. You know, Layla got accepted into the arts program she wanted. Oh yeah, I can't text them. I can't call them, but I still can be with them in the way that they're still here. I don't know what happens after if we're still conscious or connected to people or if we just become energy or if it just becomes the ultimately peaceful dark room with nothing happening in it that we came from in the first place. But I it's like when of all people, Keanu Reeves was on a show and someone asked him, what do you think happens when we die? And he paused for a second and went, the ones who love us will miss us. And that's the only certain thing about people dying. We don't know what happens next, but the people who are still here can miss and honor the ones who left. So I've been really focused on that. And I think it'll after we have a bunch of shows coming up in spring and summer, and then I've been writing like mad, have a bunch of songs ready, and I think that that's going to influence what we do next. It can't not be in there. And one of the beautiful things of going through it and even sharing what's happening on social media is the amount of people also going through it, or people going, my dad died when I was 12, or I never knew my mom. She was out of the picture really fast, or,
Mm.
you know, we all, it's the ordinariest thing, it's the most inevitable thing. And for so long, there's been ooh, that's contagious, or, ooh, I don't want to talk about it, where I find there's been an increased dialogue around it right now. And someone said to me a while back, they're hoeing the row behind us now. I'm 51. We're only a couple rows away from it being our turn. So you got to get straight with that shit and understand what it means to still be here and what it will mean to whenever we go to what's next.
You're 51 as well, hey?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, we've got what, maybe 20, 25, 30 more good years, and then
yeah.
it's our turn.
Yep. So I started looking at, I'm playing this lap steel style with three pretty heavy metal things on my fingers. There'll come a point where I won't be able to physically do that. So I want to do everything now that I want to do to make sure that I say everything there that I have to say. Um, I I thankfully my voice feels great and I can sing everything I did when I was 25 and I think I sing it better now. There will come a point though where I won't be able to do those
Mhm.
falsetto screams or whatever it is. Got to do that stuff now. And if there's one thing for people who are listening, a thing that I am grateful every day that I did, if you do have a parent or both parents left, um, I had for whatever reason, and I don't think it's a transactional thing where it's like, in order to balance the scales, this is what's going to happen. Last year was objectively one of the best years of my life on every front. Um, Whether it was getting promoted to vice president at this company because I'm making all these successful partnerships with the biggest promoters in the world and helping festivals grow their audiences and traveling around the world doing that. The Widemouth was inducted into the Western Canadian Music Hall of Fame in Saskatoon, and Saf and I were there with our moms and with our friends, and all these musicians sent in these testimonials saying beautiful things about us, and we really got our flowers. We got to feel the love. My daughter's acting career is taking off, and she's getting all these roles, and it was a really beautiful year. And uh, funny enough, I when I take her to dancing at the hall where I am, I often walk around the neighborhood and just take stock or write. The house that Hendrix grew up in, because his grandma lived here, is just down the block. So I often walk by it and just
Mhm.
think. And I'd started writing this thing that is gonna end up in a song somewhere that went, how different things had been in these moments that we'd had if we'd reveled in the good hard as we wallowed in the bad. And that something that I've leaned into since with my parents, or even with when I was having that amazing year, going, really feel the joy of this. Like, pause and take a deep breath and feel the gratitude and the happiness for how well things are going. It was a sweet spot of a bunch of stuff going well at the same time. Man, wallow in that like as much as you can. I'd speak to myself and go, how fortunate. Look at the city I live in. Look what I get to do. Look what most of the lives on Earth are right now, and look at the one you have. And the thing I would implore everyone to do, if you can, if you still have them, is I wrote to both of my parents and went, you guys had me when you were really young. You never got to go away to college. You never got to have your own apartment with your friends. You went into being parents right away. And that you sacrificed for me to have a life. I want you to know we won. I have a beautiful life. I have a beautiful family. I live in an amazing place. I have two careers that I love. I have friends. I have passions. I have things that I love to do. I have a community. I have an audience for my band. Like, thank you. And if you ever had any question about, did we do an okay job? Was it worth it? We were just kids. We didn't know how to do this. I want you to know you crushed it. We're good. Um, and 4 months later, they're both gone. So part of what's made it easier to deal with is there wasn't anything unsaid. There wasn't anything that I'm sitting here going, fuck, I wonder if my dad knows how much I loved him. I wonder if my mom knows that, you know, we talked out this issue around this one thing, or that she knows how much I loved her around this. Do it now. If you're listening, man, find a way to do that stuff now so that you don't regret it afterwards.
I feel like I got to call my mom after this, buddy. I wish I was beside you to
Please
give you a
do.
hug, man.
Please do call her.
What's the plan for you and the fam for summer and summer break and all that?
I have
What do
a
you guys get up
bunch of
to?
shows. The end of this month, we have a bunch of shows in Ontario and Quebec. We're playing um, in April in Saskatchewan and a few other places. In May, we're playing here at the Hollywood
Oh, you playing the
with
Hollywood? Nice, dude.
Airborne
Wow, great
Toxic
room.
event. Yeah, love the Hollywood.
Airborne Toxic event still around. I didn't know that.
Yeah, haven't
Oh, they're
seen them
great,
in
man.
ages. And then we're playing at the Blue Frog, recording video and audio the next day. So a lot of touring for us, a lot of acting and theater camps for my daughter,
Mm,
because she's really discovering herself as a songwriter and an actor and loves that community. So we're supporting her as best we can with acting school and camps and that kind of stuff. And so a lot of touring for the band and then family stuff in between. How about you, buddy? What are you doing this summer?
uh, I don't know. To be honest, I'm not sure. I'd probably hit the Okanagan, probably hit Tofino. We always do those two places for sure. But Jess just started an RMT course, so she's kind of like knee deep in that. And of course, they don't get much time off at all. Like it's two and a bit years, 2.5 years or something, but like full on, right? So uh, it's probably going to be me and the boys. A lot of PNE, a lot of just kind of dicking around doing Vancouver stuff. Certainly not going to
The
the
good old
States, man. I'm not
days.
going there. That's
Yeah,
gonna
we
be a
were
bit.
supposed to be going to Palm Springs and then pulled the plug on it. Like,
Yeah,
not right now.
I've seen a lot of stores taking out the liquor and taking out the this and that's, and like I support that shit, man. Like 51st state and the trolling and all that shit. I'm so proud of what we're doing as a country at this point,
Yeah. How surreal that it's in. That's what I mean about the Canucks stuff, or or you know, it feels like since New Year's Eve, 2025, everything has just gone completely sideways. And you think big picture and then you get exhausted at a certain point and just go, all right, what can I control? I
Yeah.
can tend my own garden. I can make sure my own little space in the world is full of creativity and friendship and joy and love and take a stand for things, and yeah, vote with your wallet and your decisions. And but weird times, man. We've lived through like that last thing going into COVID and shutdown, and now us talking at this point. It's it's interesting, weird times to be alive.
Governor Trudeau, like really,
Trudeau, Jesus. And just watching someone be so shitty at something
right?
day in and day out and just change their mind, and it's really exhausting, and it's designed to be
Well, of
exhausting
course
and
it is,
and
right?
make
I
us
love that
not
it's
pay
like
attention.
the tariffs are now off, and we're like, tariffs
Yeah.
are still on. Like we're still not selling your Kentucky booze. So
Yeah. So happy to not have to be a world leader who has to go in and kiss the ring and curtsy and then ask for what they really want. And it's yeah, everyone's sort of at a lot. And you know, Trudeau's quip the other day of, how would you characterize this time? And he's like, Thursday. It's like every fucking day there's another disaster, another thing that you wake up and your phone just crushes down on you first thing when you wake up. So again, it inspires you to really take stock and go, of the available hours that I'm going to be here, what do I want to fill that time with? What do I want to focus on, put my energy into? And it really it narrows the aperture, which I think is a useful thing for people to use in every element of their lives.
Yeah, I think that's why I like the Canucks at this point, is just because it's kind of a bit of a distraction from the shit that's, happening,
Yeah.
and the how close we are to the, yeah. Anyway, Shaun, I guess I'll wrap it up here, buddy. I'll respect your time, and so good to see you. So good to talk. Good to catch up and hear the stories, and uh,
Yeah.
yeah, look forward to seeing you in person. Give you a hug.
Always good to see you, my friend, and thanks for reaching out. Good to talk to you.